All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're talking about a company trying to do something that's, well, almost impossible. They're trying to break a decades-old monopoly in one of the toughest industries on the entire planet. This is the incredible story of Changsun Memory Technologies, or as we'll call them, CXMT, China's new challenger in the super high-stakes world of DRAM memory. Now, before we go any further, you have to understand this one simple fact. The DRAM market is brutal. It's not just competitive, it's known as a place where even the biggest corporate empires go to die. Seriously, for decades, company after company has tried to get a piece of this market and has just been crushed, leaving behind this tiny, exclusive club of survivors. And for a very long time, that club has had only 3 members. You've got Samsung and SK Hynix from South Korea and Micron from the United States. That's it, the big 3. They've completely dominated the global market. But now there's a new kid on the block, CXMT from China. And they're not just knocking on the door, they are crashing the party in a huge way. So why do we call it a graveyard? What is it that makes this market so incredibly difficult to succeed in? Well, it really all boils down to the very nature of the product itself. See, DRAM is a commodity. That basically means one company's memory chip is pretty much the same as another's. There's no brand loyalty here. So what does that do? It forces everyone into this ruthless, cutthroat competition based on only 2 things: being the cheapest and producing at a mind-boggling scale. And that competition is just savage for a few key reasons. The market has these insane price swings that are tied to, whether people are buying new smartphones this year or not. Building the factories, the fabs, costs billions. And to survive the inevitable downturns when prices crash, you need deep, deep pockets. The kind of stable, long-term financing that really only the biggest giants can get. Now, for China, this is not a new dream. The ambition to have their own domestic DRAM champion, man, it's a story filled with literally decades of frustration and failure. And you can see why they're so motivated. China consumes a staggering 40% of all the world's semiconductors. Think about that. They are by far the biggest customer, but for all these years, they've never had their own top-tier DRAM supplier. So creating one wasn't just a business goal, it was a national priority. And this timeline, it really shows a 50-year history of things just not working out. The pattern was always the same. A Chinese company would hit some technical milestone, which was great, but they'd still be years behind the leaders. And then, like clockwork, that brutal market cycle would turn, prices would plummet, and the whole venture would collapse. It was this heartbreaking story of getting close but falling just short, over and over again. But out of all those ashes of past failures, a totally new strategy was born. One that would finally produce the champion that China had been waiting for all this time. Our story really kicks off in 2016. The city of Hefei's government investment fund teamed up with a memory company called GigaDevice. Together, they started this thing called Project 506, which would eventually grow up to become CXMT. And this time, they were not playing around. The initial investment was a jaw-dropping $7.2 billion. This was a clear signal to the world. Unlike all the past attempts, this time the full financial weight of the state was going to be behind this project. So they had the money. A lot of it. But in this industry, cash alone isn't enough, not even close. You need the technology, you need the know-how. So how on earth did CXMT build this memory beast from scratch so incredibly quickly? This really is the key question, right? The big 3 had a head start that was decades long. So how did a brand new company, starting from zero, manage to close that enormous gap? Well, the answer lies in a really clever 2-part strategy. Okay, step 1. They needed a legitimate technology base to avoid getting sued into oblivion. So they went out and acquired a mountain of technical data. I'm talking 2.8 terabytes from a bankrupt German pioneer called Qmanda. This gave them the legal air cover they needed. But documents are one thing. For the actual practical know-how, they hired a whole team led by the former president of the Japanese memory giant, app². It's brilliant. They bought the blueprints and then they hired the master builders to show them how to use them. And they paired that tech with a massive investment in people. CXMT went on this aggressive hiring spree, poaching the best R&D talent from Taiwan and South Korea. How? By offering salaries 3 to 5 times higher than what competitors were paying. And it worked. A recent analysis found that over a third of their key employees are veterans from Samsung and SK Hynix. They basically just imported decades of experience. And you can really see how brilliant this strategy was when you compare CXMT to another Chinese company from the same time, Fujin Jinhua. See, Jinhua also tried to build a DRAM company, but they got accused of stealing trade secrets from Micron. And the result? They got sued, slapped onto the US entity list, and were effectively crippled before they even got started. CXMT, by carefully and legally acquiring its IP, just sidestepped all those legal landmines and got to sprint ahead. Okay, so the strategy was smart, the funding was absolutely massive, and the talent was world-class. So let's look at the results. How did all this translate into actual products and real, tangible progress? In 2019, just 3 short years after it was founded, CXMT did what so many others before it couldn't. It actually shipped a commercial product. Its first DDR4 memory chip hit the market. And that was a massive, massive milestone. It proved their whole model was working. Now, at first, yeah, they were still pretty far behind. Their 2019 product was maybe 5 to 7 years behind what the leaders were making. But in just 5 years, with their new DDR5 product, they slashed that technology gap down to just 3 or 4 years. That is an incredible, almost unheard of pace of development.
And here is the part that is truly stunning. They aren't just copying anymore. They are innovating. Their latest DDR5 memory actually has a higher bit density. That means more storage packed into the same tiny area than some of their top competitors. And get this, they did it without access to EUV, the world's most advanced chip-making equipment, because of export controls. They are literally doing more with less.
So that brings us to today. CXMT has proven it's a real contender. The 50-year dream is no longer a dream. It's a reality. So what does the battlefield look like now that the fight for the future is truly, officially underway? The big three? Well, they still dominate, no question. Samsung is still leading the pack, but look at that. CXMT has already carved out a solid 8% of the entire global market. They have firmly established themselves as the undisputed number 4 player. They're not a startup anymore. They are a market force.
And they are not slowing down, not one bit. A huge new factory is being built in Beijing. They just raised another $1.5 billion, valuing the company at nearly $20 billion. And analysts project their market share is going to keep growing in the coming years. The beast is still growing, and it's getting stronger.
And all of this leaves us with one final fascinating question. For 50 years, China's goal was simply to create a domestic DRAM supplier, to just get in the game. Well, now they've done it, and it's thriving. So what happens when this beast is fully grown? That, I think, is something the entire world is going to be watching very, very closely.